Beloved friends, colleagues, and the celestial curious, welcome. Becca Tarnis will now read some lines from the Romantic poet John Keats, who was born with a very similar Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Neptune in conjunction as the stellium in the sky today.
These lines are from a letter that John Keats wrote to a friend on November 22nd, 1817. And he said, "I am certain of nothing but of the holiness of the heart's affections and the truth of imagination. What the imagination seizes as beauty must be truth, whether it existed before or not. For I have the same idea of all our passions as of love. They are all in their sublime, creative of essential beauty." And the relevance of this quote for our event today, besides reflecting the archetypal transits in the sky at the moment, is that the imagination is a faculty of discovering truth, and it is essential for developing the archetypal eye that we all use in our astrological practice and bring forward here. Thank you, Ren.
Beautifully said, Becca. Beautifully said. Thank you. We come together today to celebrate the birth of an exciting new community project, ANN, Archetypal News Network. And many thanks to all the people who helped us come up with that name. We had a few different possibilities: Astrology News Network, Archetypal Astrology News Network. Special thanks to Max, Becca, and Kieran LeGrice for almost insisting that Archetypal News Network was the best choice, and I do agree with that. Thank you. One of the most rewarding parts of a project like this are the collaboration and synergy with colleagues and the community connection with like-minded people around the world. We are very happy to be sharing this moment with you today. I will now introduce my fellow panelists, starting with James Moran.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here with you all. My name is James Moran, practicing archetypal astrologer. I'm located in the Washington, D.C. area, and I am so joyful to be here with you this moment, here with you, all your unique presences, and born at this time in history. And I'm glad to be here. And Ren, thank you for sparking this off. And next up, we have Becca Tarnis.
Hi, I'm Becca Tarnis, and I'm a counseling astrologer. I live in Nevada City, California. I'm also a professor at CIS and Pacifica Graduate Institute, and it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Ren and James, for bringing forth this creative new project. And I now want to invite Alex to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Stein, and I'm coming to you all from Maui. So I'm an archetypal astrologer, and I am just thrilled to be here to see so many lovely familiar faces and new faces, and to just be a part of this, be doing astrology at this time in history, to be alive in this moment, which feels like a pretty crazy and difficult and uncertain moment, but it's also pregnant with so much possibility. And it's, yeah, it's just beautiful to be able to be here and share this with you all. So thank you. And now I will pass it on to Lisa.
Thanks, Alex. I'm Lisa, Virginia. It's so nice to be here with you all. And thanks to Ren and James and everybody else on the panel. I know Ren's been working hard to pull everyone together. So this is great that we're all here kicking this off today. And thank you to the 84 people that we have. So thanks for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. So I'm located in Southern California, and I'm also an archetypal astrologer. I also teach environmental media, environmental justice locally here as well. So I'm just so excited excited, as others have said, to be a part of this now. I feel like astrology is slowly ever more becoming a part of public consciousness and the sort of tendency towards an archetypal perspective and viewpoint. So it's just exciting to be a part of a panel that will really dedicate time to sort of highlight these trends as we watch them unfolding during this exciting time. So with that, I will hand it over to Ren.
Okay, this is a chart for 2 minutes from now, and this essentially is the chart for today. And there are many reasons why we chose today. Our partners on this happy day, as always, are the archetypal gods and goddesses. We can perhaps sense the broad, wide-ranging curiosity and celebrational optimism of the Mercury conjunct Jupiter here. The impulses toward dramatic and expansive innovations and breakthroughs manifested in sustained and grounded forms of the Jupiter-Saturn square Uranus. This Jupiter-Uranus is now outside of the 10-degree orb, but it is still part of a field with the Jupiter-Saturn, and Jupiter-Uranus will be coming back with an orb later in the year, so we are still in that Jupiter-Uranus. We can also see the capacity for focused effort and precision of the Mars trine Saturn, very helpful to have in a project like this. But the heart of this exquisite moment feels like the wondrous conjunction of the Sun, Moon, Venus, Neptune, which we plan to have right there on the midheaven for this moment. Neptune is the astrological symbol for the field of consciousness, which underlies, connects, and gives meaning to all things, divine consciousness, God or goddess. It also, the Neptune archetype represents our deep yearnings to reawaken and reconnect with that wellspring of happiness, security, and meaning. And this is a blessed and wondrous engaged Neptune that we're all experiencing right now. We want to unveil the treasures of the heavens for you to cherish in this ANN project and to teach you to perceive them for yourselves. In this sublime quest, Neptune merged with the moon suggests sacred feelings of comfort, nurture, and community. With the sun, illumination, inspiration, and light, and with Venus, love, sweetness, and beauty. Ken Wilber, born with Venus square Neptune, wrote that history is a love affair with the divine consciousness. We hope that your experiences with ANN deepen that love, the sense of awe and mystery as we look deeply into the pristine starry night or the deep openings within us of soul and spirit. And now just imagine you're joining hands with everyone in this group and anyone else you want to include. And we're going to take a minute of silence just to feel this sweet moment. Alex noticed that Stevie Wonder has some Moon, Venus, Neptune happening in his chart. Alex, do you want to mention that?
Yeah, that's right. So he's got a Moon Venus conjunction on his descendant, opposite Neptune on his ascendant, and you know that song was actually written for his daughter right after she was born, and so I thought it would be perfect to play today anyway. But then just noticing that correlation, you know, we're talking about welcoming in the divine feminine, welcoming the feminine back into the, you know, equal relationship once again on Earth. And so it brings in the lunar dimensions of family and parenthood, the mother, the daughter, and then just the sweet kind of ideal love of Neptune, Venus. And so much of that just comes through with Stevie Wonder across the board. He just carries this energy of sweetness and innocence and love and goodness and joy. And so I think that's something that is really coming through today anyway with the transits, and that, with ANN being born today with the stellium, I think it promises for us as well.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
And Tatiana put together that music clip before that. Thank you very much, Tatiana. So our main panelists now will each do about a 6-minute round talking about our love of astrology and anything else they want to talk about, beginning with James. Great.
Thank you, Ren. It's great to be here with you all, and I want to share a little bit about myself, some of my personal story, so that you can know me better and we can be acquainted and become closer in this nice Moon Neptune type community. And yeah, my love of astrology, I really do love astrology. When I encountered astrology for the first time, it was like the sentiment in that song. It was like, isn't she lovely? Like, wow, she is lovely, because the act of perceiving astrology is the act of perceiving the world and the beauty that underlies the world. So the practice of astrology is a practice, and it has its own structure, but it's really a root. It's really a root for being able to perceive the just sublime beauty of the archetypes, the gods and goddesses, the cycling through of form and perception, and the fluctuation of form and perception in this beautiful tapestry that we're all part of. And I came into astrology, that moment of isn't she lovely, isn't she beautiful, was cracking open Cosmos and Psyche, the book Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnis, because I knew nothing about astrology before that. That was my introduction to astrology. And actually, I was raised in Washington, D.C. area, and was surrounded by obviously what is a kind of a political atmosphere in a family of academics. And I didn't personally take to the political atmosphere, and not even really that much to the academic atmosphere. I was very much interested in spirituality. And so when it came time for me to go in for higher education, go to college, I left Washington, D.C. I went out to California. I decided to study at the University of California at Santa Cruz. And one of the reasons I headed west is because I had become exposed to the work of Stan Grof. And I was very impressed with it. And I set up shop out west, and then I ended up doing a study abroad in India, started studying a lot of yoga and meditation, and dedicated 2 decades of my life to studying yoga and meditation, which brought me background eventually to the work of Grof, and quickly thereafter to the work of Richard Tarnis. And when I discovered astrology, I realized that in my own personal search of kind of spiritual thirst, it wasn't just a spiritual thirst. There was a desire to get beneath the surface and connect with something sublime that I hadn't been exposed to growing up. I had a sense that there's something more than this kind of surface layer of society and perception and politics that I had been exposed to. And so I had that desire to connect with something more. But when I cracked that book open, and when I cracked open Cosmos and Psyche, it's a big book, it's over 500 pages. I read it cover to cover. I hardly got up to eat, to shower. I had to get up. I had to go to work when I had to go to work. But as soon as I came home, I was back looking at it. And that was that moment where I realized that I wasn't just on a search for a sense of spiritual connection to something profound in life, but I was actually on a search for a language without even knowing it. I was on a search for a language to perceive and to communicate, to both read and communicate on a level of perception of reality. That's what I had been searching for. And so so I read that book, and it felt familiar to me. The archetypes, I just clicked right in. And I was in the good fortune of living in the East Bay, in the San Francisco Bay, and I discovered that the author of this book was right nearby. Did a course at Esalen with him and Stan Groff, and then I just took off from there. And so so that's my love of astrology, and it's an undying, unfading thing, because it's love of the true sublime texture and depth of life that I feel. And so I'm so feeling very grateful to have the role that I play and the work that I do, and to be part of this community, and to be part of this panel, and to be colleagues with my colleagues, and to be connected with Ren, who's really the kind of the Aries spark here. So thank you all so much. And yes, thank you. I want to pass it on to Becca here.
Thank you for that, James. That was beautiful to hear those parts of your story told. For my first share on the panel, I wanted to speak a little bit about what I see the role of the Archetypal News Network offering, and what it means to bring news and astrology together. And something that has become increasingly clear, although astrology has been so maligned by the modern worldview, and in the academy, and in a within a materialist paradigm, over the last several years, we have seen more and more of an interest in astrology, and this turning back to an ancient wisdom, and not only looking back toward it, but bringing ancient techniques and also the development or the perfection of new techniques into this time. And over the last about half decade or so, that interest has really started to peak, and we have seen news stories and articles that now present astrology in a favorable light, taking it very seriously. And this is a major breakthrough within this paradigm. And as that interest has been rising, the last year, 2020, and the events associated with the coronavirus pandemic have brought forward the need for a larger perspective and ability to explain what we are seeing unfolding. And so those who maybe were right on the fence as this interest in astrology has been burgeoning, the events associated with the pandemic really have started to tip those scales, and that an astrological worldview is one of the few things that really can help us understand what is happening in this time. And when news is offered, not just as a reporting of facts, but as an entertainment narrative that can often be very overwhelming, to be able to approach that from a place that orients toward it as something sacred. I think what the Archetypal News Network can offer is a bringing together of the sacred and the profane. I'm one of those individuals who gets very overwhelmed by trying to watch the news. It can feel really bombarding. And so I take in the world's events mostly through reading. And something like what is being created here with ANN can really open up the possibility to see, even into the most difficult or challenging or sometimes meaningless feeling events, a greater purpose. And that is such an extraordinary reconnection, a reconnection between the microcosm of our human earthly experiences and the macrocosm of the archetypal patternings of the cosmos. And in approaching the world's events in this way, what it means to stay current, to stay up to date, isn't just keeping up with the next news story. It means living in the rhythms of the cosmos. And that is a radical reorientation that brings together all of the dimensions of our experience, not just the mental and the intellectual, but the emotional and the relational and the somatic, and of course, the spiritual and the psychological. So there's a knitting back together of our experience that this can offer. And it, just finally, to conclude this thought, what astrology furthermore gives us when we are understanding the world's events is that sense of timing, and how many of us have felt in the difficulties of this last year, correlating primarily with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, the Jupiter-Saturn-Pluto triple conjunction that was so dominant in 2020. And when the mantra that comes up within us of "this too shall pass," astrology actually affirms that for us. It tells us when this will pass, when the archetypal zeitgeist will shift. And that is a completely different way of viewing the unfolding of the world's events. And it's a radically new way of presenting the news. So I'm so eager to see how that different perspective shapes how we all learn to participate in the world's events. So I will now pass this over to Alex. Thank you so much.
I thank you, both Becca and James. I agree with everything you guys just said. So back you up 100%. Yeah, I want to talk about my love of astrology, because, you know, when I discovered astrology, it was a very similar sort of a thing to what James described, and it too was Cosmos and Psyche that really did it for me. And you know, all my life, I've kind of struggled with this balance between a kind of mystical, artsy, sensitive, diffuse, imagistic kind of thinking, and then like kind of more hardcore, rational, analytical, intellectual type of thinking. And it's been a little bit of a battle for me. Got a Mercury Neptune square. But the you know, one of my earliest memories, and I think it was triggered by the song "Row, Row, Row Your Boat," "Life is but a dream." I was sitting in the sandbox and I went, "Hey, that's true. Like, what if life is just God's dream?" And so that thought has been with me my whole life. And I'm also a musician, as you know, it's not uncommon for astrologers to be musicians, and it is, after all, called music of the spheres. And that's no joke. That's not even like, I spend a lot of time talking about the reality of metaphor, and how metaphor is something more than just a kind of little cherry on top. How metaphor is actually a deep way of dialoguing with the universe. But I also want to say that when we talk about astrology as music of the spheres, that ain't just a metaphor. Like, it's real. It really is a form of music. And just like music conveys something that we can't put our finger on, and that we can enjoy it more, we can appreciate music more if we know how to talk about it. But talking about it never even comes close to actually listening to it. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with life, right? Life is really the music that the music of the spheres is pointing to. And so, like James, I was always on the search for a language in my life, and I found it through music. But I feel like what archetypal astrology has given me is this. It's like a middle path. It's like an intellectual middle path, I guess. It's a way of holding both the imaginal and the mystical, and the rational and the logical, or really the empirical, I should say, like, because we really see this stuff grounded in reality, you know, grounded in the world around us. It's all of this kind of diffuse, airy-fairy sort of stuff becomes very concrete and real, and I think that that's an amazing thing about it. At the same time, it helps us both make things concrete and real, but also see past the kind of literalism that we usually apply to things. And I think this is why people continue to have a hard time with astrology, is that we're used to thinking of things in very literal terms. And, you know, we think A causes B causes C. And, well, we know that the planets don't send down rays that cause us to behave in certain ways. So, you know, astrology must be bogus. And if you believe in astrology, then you're just looking for comforting answers to questions that can't be answered. I feel like what astrology gives us is not the ability to answer any questions, but to, like Rilke said, to live with the questions, or to live the questions more fully. And yeah, you know, something that Becca said about, you know, when I start to think of this as how it relates to the news, you know, so much news, like Becca said, has been geared toward a kind of entertainment, and it's a sort of sick form of entertainment. It's kind of when we bring archetypal thinking into it, it moves it from being like this kind of sick, cheap form of entertainment to engaging with events as art. You know, it's the difference between like a really moving, beautiful work of art and, you know, just some schlock that somebody put up there to push people's buttons and make some money. And so yeah, for me, the thing that astrology really really gives me is this ability to appreciate life as art, and it elevates art to something greater. You know, we can appreciate life as art, but appreciate art as a reflection of life and a way of teaching us to be and to think and to feel. So, you know, well, actually, I'll save this other stuff for the second half of my talk. I haven't been watching the time. I have no idea how long I've been talking. So I think I'll just say some more stuff later, and I'll pass it on to Lisa right now. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Alex. That was lovely, and Becca and James as well. I feel like some of what I'll share will certainly have some overlap. But when I think about why I love astrology, what tends to come up is also why it's important and sort of the gifts that it can give you. So I tried to condense a few major points here that sort of rose to surface or relevance for me. So the first is that it's a language for the subtle realm and, quote, a way home to ourselves. So astrology is basically an acknowledgement of the reality, power, and legitimacy of the inner psychic landscape. And this is incredibly relevant and important for those of us who have been raised in a Western European mindset, trained in the scientific method, where our awareness is trained outward, as Alex mentioned, with sort of the cause and effect that we're always looking for, and this desire to draw neat, parsimonious theories that can explain everything. Really, that's, in a sense, a way to seek control through knowing at some level. And so unless we're really raised in a family or a culture where turning inward was emphasized, practiced, and revered, many of us in this Western culture have to find that way home to ourselves on our own. And of course, there's many modalities to do that. There's therapy, breath work, dream work, personal reflections, walking, whatever works for you. But I think for many of us here, I can assume it's safe to say that astrology does offer that language for self-reflection and to develop that keen attention to be able to observe and integrate things that you're seeing in that archetypal perspective. So it's this shorthand that we can use to understand what's going on inside and see it reflected outside. So that was sort of the first point, that subtle realm. The other thing that I was thinking about was that it really does shift and change your perspective from a linear to a cyclic way of thinking in the world, right? So again, we can see this in many ways. One way to think about it is even how we move through life. So many of us are given this social contract, we inherit it, we don't even know that we have it, but really that there's a series of steps that we must move through to achieve certain benefits in life, right? So for instance, maybe we'll have success after being credentialed in our chosen field, which leads to a sense of fulfillment. Or if we partner up with the right person, have the right match, there's that fulfillment as well. These are all acts that sort of promise a level of certainty. We're working towards things to make ourselves happy by like working with and trying to shift and change the outside world. It's not to say that we can't and we shouldn't interact with the world around us, but astrology reminds us that ultimately there are larger cyclic patterns at play. And so if we are looking externally and we don't achieve that sense of fulfillment, there can be this sort of like, what am I doing wrong? There's something that I must adjust or change. But astrology can remind us that the suffering that we might face and feel really has little to do with have we done the right thing, but more like that we just need to understand that things come in waves, that no matter how we're feeling and what's going on externally, some of it's in our control, but ultimately we have to give over to this larger thing that's going on, right? And that's, again, that cyclic perspective. It's a vision of the seasons, of cycles, of returning to the same themes in our lives at different times with some predictable regularity even. And so even if we think we've addressed something and it's gone, the likely chance is that we're going to have to deal with it again. But hopefully at that point, we'll be more prepared for it. And astrology can remind us by being like, oh, when's the last time I had this transit? When's it going to come up again? How is it going to manifest? So again, linear to cyclic. And the last sort of piece I'll share for now is just, in considering all of this is this idea of like what's I like to call breathing together. Another way to say that there's this synchronous activity, everything around us is connected. It's something that we hear many different ways, many different words to describe that same concept. But ultimately, that it allows us some sort of comfort in knowing that we're all going through something together. And so that's why this is such a great network also, to see how what we're experiencing inward is reflected outward, how others are feeling. And it just diffuses a lot of the tension that we might otherwise feel when we're trying to understand what's going on around us. So yeah, thank you all. And with that, I will hand it over to Ren.
Thank you, Lisa. And thanks you, everyone. It's just amazing to hear people speaking about things that I love and agree with, and so deep and poetically as well. The idea for ANN began somewhere around Christmas this year. James and I also had a conversation in San Francisco in August 2019, the day after the grand launch of Stan Groff's Way of the Psychonaut book. I highly recommend reading that if you don't have it. And James said that he was thinking about some kind of a 24-hour astrology channel on TV. And I, at the time, I thought maybe YouTube is a good place to start. Then the idea just kind of went underground for a little while until about Christmas. And we started organizing this basically January 1st. So a lot has happened between now and then, and just so thrilled to have such an amazing group of colleagues to collaborate with. I began thinking about it myself in the late 80s or early 90s during the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. I think as it was reaching kind of close to exact right around in those years. We spend so much time thinking about, as Lisa said, external things like the stock market. Becca also mentioned this, the weather, the temperature, the barometric pressure, so many external things that we are looking at constantly. And an essential part of the new paradigm, I believe, is to give equal attention to our inner lives, our subjective lives. That is what was cleansed out during the scientific revolution, especially Descartes and Galileo. And they wanted to focus on external measurable things in the universe. What we need to do now is to reclaim the missing subjective side of our psyches, our feelings, our musings, our dreams, our hopes, wishes. And astrology is is a very concise and poetic language for human experience. If someone asks me how I'm doing and I say I have transiting Saturn square my natal Neptune, which I do right now, if they know astrology, they have 3 pages of information on my experience just from that shorthand communication. It's a beautiful way to talk about relationship issues. My Venus is conjunct, Carmen Uranus, let's say. That just says so much, and it's a very beautiful language for speaking about our inner lives. The emotions and patterns associated with the archetypes are very valuable things for us to think about in an ongoing way. As Jung understood and discovered, introspection is intrinsically liberating. The self-liberating power of the introspective mind is how he phrased it. And astrology can help us to do that, to understand our process. Something else that I think should be covered more often in the news is the parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. And I will be mentioning that from time to time in my segments. That is more important than the stock market for the future economic and also very, health, a very existence of humanity. So I discovered astrology myself in the fall of 1979. Someone had left behind in my parents' home a copy of the Astrologer's Handbook. It's not this exact copy, but it was this exact edition of it by Secoyan and Acker, Francis Secoyan Louis S. Acker. It turned out to be a very lucky book to have discovered. And early September 1979, I sank my teeth into that book, and I've been in love with astrology ever since. There hasn't been a day or a week has gone by that I haven't thought about astrology and loved it. It's like sunshine to me. And some of that, comes from this another lucky moment in my life. I was able to go to the Esalen Institute as a work scholar in December 1979. And I see some of my beloved friends from Esalen are here, Brian and Joyce. Hi, so glad you could join us. And I was able to connect with Rick Tarnis there. And Rick, many of you may know, has a sun exactly on his midheaven, trine Uranus, exactly on his ascendant, sun trine Uranus. He did have, and he still has, so much outpouring enthusiasm for astrology. Fascinating lucidity is how someone described his writing and his communication. And the sun Uranus brightness and capacity to illuminate and inspire has been fundamental in my experience of astrology. I think that's probably my 6 minutes. So I would like to introduce several other people who are going to be anchors and presenters in ANN. Chris unfortunately couldn't make it. Chris McNulty, very talented astrologer. I'm sure you will enjoy his segments, Planet Talk segments. He's going to post an introduction of himself on ANN. But I would like to now open this up to Danielle, to Danielle.
Danielle, yeah, thanks, Ren. Yeah, thank you. I will be doing some full and new moon live streams. So in a few weeks here, I'll be broadcasting from the Caribbean, which will be super fun. I'm in Boulder, Colorado right now, where I work as a therapist. And so a lot of my interest in astrology has been about integrating how this can apply to the individual and their self-knowing, and also as a lens for suffering. A long time ago, I think that I came to astrology when I was in high school, trying to figure out how I was compatible with my boyfriends, and then just kind of trusted this authentic journey of loving it so much as a hobby, that I found a way to integrate it into a master's program. I had a professor that let me do research on eating disorders and natal charts. And then the clinical chair was like, who let you do this, when it was time for me to graduate? And I was like, I don't know. I stayed at that school in clinical psych and started a doctorate, and then I realized like this just wasn't speaking my language, and so I found Pacifica and started studying with Kieran, and did some extra studying on the side with him. And he has a program, the Institute of Transpersonal and Archetypal Studies. So I've been there for a few years, and now I'm writing my dissertation on archetypal astrology and active imagination in Jung's Black Books. So a big part of astrology, I think, from over the past 10 years has been still like this coming out of the closet thing. And I just love like where we're at now today and how much it's grown even over the past decade. But there's still this kind of surrendering and trusting the journey with it. And yeah, I think that kind of speaks to maybe the dynamics of the chart today with Neptune and the surrender to the process of this brand new beginning of things, but also being in the feminine and speaking that style of consciousness and seeing where it wants to go is very exciting. But it is a different journey. It is a trusting of psyche and soul. And so what I do today is I'm very much interested in how we experience the archetypes or the planets, the planetary archetypes within us, and how we can know them through personifying them and doing art therapy around that, dialoguing with them, and really getting to explore that inner landscape that Lisa was talking about. And so my path is integrating how archetypal astrology can fit into clinical counseling. Yeah, much work to do there still, but I'm excited to be a part of this. Thank you for inviting me, Ren.
Thanks to Ren and for starting ANN. And I want to say for the past decade, since I started with archetypal astrology, it was thanks to Stan Groff for leading the way and talking about the 4 outer planets correlated with the 4 perinatal matrices. I want to thank all of you that I've had readings with and training sessions with over the years. It's working. And I do a daily video blog called World Transits Today at my website, Reference Astrology, and is now on Apple Podcasts. Hey! And I look forward to hearing what all you have to say. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Art. Barbara, would you like to go next?
Yes, absolutely. So hi, thank you, first of all, for having me here, for being here. This is very exciting, being here at the birthing of this new project. I'm Barbara Jerovich Arias. I am a counseling astrologer located in Denver. How I got in touch with astrology was through the study of Jung and other spiritual practices. I was kind of like being directed to astrology. I grew up with astronomers aficionados, and they used to teach me about the constellations and stars when I was a child. So once I found astrology, my love for inner journeys and psychology and the cosmos kind of married. I found a sacred marriage between the two. So I went deep into the study of astrology, and then I got exposed to Stan Groff's work, which led me back into astrology, in this case, archetypal astrology. And my intention, I think, is kind of aligned with a lot of you, where I want to use this as a therapeutic tool to help clients integrate sessions, holotropic sessions, or other types of sessions. And yeah, and I really believe that it's important to use the language of astrology in a way that serves others. And yeah, and that's kind of my whole approach with it. I do have a podcast. It's called Deep Journeys Astrology Podcast, and I'm excited to maybe have some of you in it, interview you, and have interesting conversations about all of this. Brem was in one of my episodes, and I'll be hosting some of the new moon, full moon broadcastings that we're going to have. So thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
And I think it's Dulcie next, right?
think, was it Max and then me?
It can be you.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. My name is Dulcie Cardinal. I'm living in Victoria. I am an astrology student. I first started studying Hellenistic astrology with Achyuta Bhavadas. And when I moved here to Victoria, I met Ren and became interested in archetypal astrology. So I have been taking his course and learning a lot from him. So I'm also doing a master's degree in counseling psychology. So I hope to combine the two fields together in my future practice. I'm currently working in a care home with older individuals with developmental disabilities, and loving it and looking at their birth charts and having fun with them, discussing astrology and, teaching them some of the basics. So I run the Astrology Victoria group here with my astro partner, Tatiana, and we host monthly casual astro chats and more formal astro talks with astrologers. And they were originally in person, but now they are all online. So you're all welcome to join from wherever you are. And I will be hosting some of the new and full moon celebrations as well. So thank you. I'll pass it on to Max.
It's wonderful to be here with all of you, and congratulations to Ren and James and the whole team here. This is amazing community coming together, and I'm happy to be a part of it. My name is Max Diarman. I'm a doctoral student with Richard Tarnis, and I've been studying archetypal astrology for 8 years now. And yeah, as Ren mentioned, we've been working on a documentary about Richard Tarnis's work, specifically around Uranus-Pluto cycles. And we've been working on it for the last 5 years. The film is called Changing of the Gods, and it's turned into a 10-part series that will be releasing later this year. So we're excited to share it with all of you. And there's a trailer on YouTube if you want to check it out or visit the website. But we're just finishing up in the editing studio right now in the next couple months, and hopefully releasing it to the world soon. So blessing to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Max. I saw the first episode, not the totally finished version, but very close to it. And it is brilliant, breathtaking, very clear and colorful and riveting, very persuasive and compelling. I think you've done a masterful job. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with as many people as I can. So,
thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to also introduce Tatiana Hassan. She has played an important role in the last few months in helping to create our introduction video clips for our segments. And Tatiana, would you like to play the second one?
We are ANN, and this is Planet Talk.
Awesome job. Thank you, Tatiana. I really appreciate your creative enthusiasm. We did quite a few rounds back and forth to get that in a good form. Would you like to say a little bit about creation of those and or yourself as an astrologer?
Oh, absolutely. So, well, first of all, thank you so much, Rand, for making this. Like, this is amazing, and being here with everybody, and for inviting me into this thing. I think it was just like I just plopped by spirit into all of this, and then when you asked me to do this, I'm a visual artist, so I'm as well as other things. But creating this was just a very exciting project. As soon as Ren told me, like, let's create this thing, I was like, yes, I love it. That's part of what I do is do visuals and music. And then when Alex put the music in, and then we went back and forth with the ideas, and I managed to also put my artistic flair into it with Ren's desires and inputs. So I think it was a wonderful thing, and I'm really excited that this is going to be there. So yeah, that's about the creation of the little thingies. And well, I live here in Victoria as well, so we're like city neighbors, Ren and I cannot be more lucky to have found such an amazing teacher and mentor. Also, I am what I would call like a baby astrologer. I've been studying very diligently for the past like 2.5 years, and evolutionary astrology and archetypal astrology, and beginning my practice as well as an astrologer, and also as a spiritual guide. I have a set of tools I call Tatiana's spiritual toolbox, and it's a little bit like a spiritual counseling and guidance with and I use art, movement, music as part of my guiding and my guidance as well. Of course, astrology has become the, like what Gretchen said, the main thing that can help me enter into people's worlds and realms of their psyche, to be able to guide them and help them with the tools that I offer through my artistic gifts, let's say. And yes, astrology found me, and I'm very happy with that. And like Dulcie said, we run Astrology Victoria together, and yes, we would love at any point to have anybody interested in also have talking and giving presentations. The whole point is to have a platform for this beautiful astrological community to keep growing even beyond Victoria. So thank you, Ren, and thank you to all the team. And yes, we'll be doing the moon in Scorpio with Dulcie this term. So praying it. Thanks.
Thank you, Tatiana. So one of the things we'll be offering will be live stream presentations at the exact moment of the new moons and full moons. And we have a few technical learning curves there, but that's what we're trying to do. Maybe start 15 minutes before or something like that. It won't happen right on the exact lunations every time, but I thought it would be very interesting to mark that moment. And it's part of the process of, the return of the repressed. We're living in such a yanged out solar culture, and to pay attention to the lunar cycles, which for thousands of years in human history, we know from archaeology, was the dominant cycle that humans followed. The early Stonehenge monuments were oriented to the moon cycle, and then later to the solstices, winter solstice, is just such an important rebalancing of our culture. So thank you all for sharing that. We will now have another round with our main presenters, and feel free to take 6 or 7 minutes, everybody. Just beginning with James Moran.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to explore a little bit about where, or rather what astrology can offer for us as a world culture moving forward. I feel that 2020 is kind of part of the choreography, just like astrology becoming more popular, just like Tatiana said, astrology found her, astrology found all of us. And it happened in an organic way, kind of mushroomed up. It happened that way in my life. And so life has its own way of evolving through us individuals, and collectively through the individual. And 2020, we could see 2020 reflected in the transits. Even 10 years ago, I remember with Rick and Erica and a bunch of different people in the astrological community, looking at 2020 and wondering what is that? What is that triple conjunction? What's it moving towards? So as 2020 happened, even before we could see it, we could see that there's something there. There's something growing. There's a movement towards a kind of a phase change. And so as it happened, in keeping with that perspective of things happening organically in life, it kind of had there's a sense of the world community becoming, we each got isolated in and of our own selves, but we also as a world community kind of got pulled together on this planet, and became aware of the kind of the fabric, more aware, I feel, of the fabric, the unified fabric that we all exist within. And so astrology coming to more popularity, I feel, is a part of that. It's a part of that. It's a part of that organic unfolding, and the world being more intimately connected is also somehow taken us over a threshold, some type of threshold that I think will become clear as we move into the future and look back. But we've crossed some type of threshold, and some type of evolutionary threshold. And the evolution, I feel, is not so much a physical evolution, the way we look at evolution in the past as, you know, beings evolving and changing physically, but it's more of an evolution that would be, the term I feel now would be a sort of a spiritual evolution. Though I feel that as we move forward and as we gain a very different perspective on life, of which astrology is an important part, my sense is that we will come up with different wording, because there's something that the entire human race and the entire world organism and world culture and world Gaia is evolving towards, that is a spiritual evolution. But there's connotations with the word spiritual. We think of like the individual spiritual quest, with like spiritual and evolution, two words. There's two words that we already have connotations with, but they're reaching to describe what's happening, and they come close, but I don't feel they can completely describe it. It's an evolution of our world culture towards something that is more self-aware, more self-informed, more, you could say, enlightened, something to that extent. Astrology in the past has often been seen as a practice for understanding mundane events, understanding one's life, though not always seen as a spiritual path. And I feel that it's a spiritual path, and I feel that it's not just a spiritual path for the individual, but for the world, in the sense that if I become aware that the boundary of what I experience inside is reflected outside, or the sky when I was born is reflective of my innermost psyche, my innermost nature. So the furthest objects away I can see are reflective of the deepest, most innermost, intimate parts of my nature, then that can be my own personal spiritual evolution, my own spiritual path, is coming to understand that, coming to, I can both use the map to understand myself, but just even the overall assumption that there is a map that's outside that reflects my innermost part is itself something that is deeply meaningful and connecting for me. So it can be on an individual sense, but then also when we look at different people's charts, different individuals' charts, we can see that, oh, when I look at a different individual's chart, I'm looking at a whole universe. I'm looking at their perspective, their whole universe that they live in, their whole perspective, everything. And it's different from mine, and they have a different birth chart. And you can realize that there's something we're moving towards that's a kind of a meta perspective that allows for, oh, look, I can see that this person has their own impulses, meanings that they give to things, their own themes that color their universe. And it doesn't just color their universe inside themselves, it colors their actual course of existence, who they meet, the situations they run into. And I realize they are a universe. They are a universe unto itself. I'm a universe unto myself. And we're somehow paradoxically sharing within the same experience. And so I can realize that there's both an overall kind of some type of unifying coalescence happening. And at the same time, there's an ability to appreciate that each of us, not only each of us has our own spiritual path, but each of us is our own spiritual path. Each of us is our own inflection of the whole. coming into its own kind of ripening, its own path. And so that's something that I feel is a beautiful duty, honestly, a beautiful duty of astrologers such as myself and Ren and so many people here, to kind of to be the evolution. You know, evolution doesn't happen outside of ourselves. Evolution happens inside us. We are that which is evolving. And so when there's something happening, you know, we're moving towards a larger inclusive perspective, and it's not an objective thing that's happening out there. We are it, you know, we are it coming to be. And then at the same time, so there's all types, you know, there's also all types of, on a more microcosmic level, there's all types of interesting kind of discoveries that we can make there that kind of boggle the more Western materialistic mind, but are just so rich. For instance, like say someone is an artist, or say someone's creating a project, and we think, oh, what's good for creating a project? Flow state. Like, I need to, you know, get into flow state, get my creativity going, or there's any type of activities that I can do to help me kind of tap in and have this project to come to fruition. And that's great. You know, thinking of it that way is great. But when I start engaging in the project and doing, you know, getting in touch with myself and flowing along, I begin to realize that outside of me, the project is also growing. You know, I might have a realization that comes from inside my head. I might have a realization that comes from outside of me. It shows up outside of me and speaks to me through an event, through a person, through words, through a song, whatever it is. And I realized that, oh, when something comes to be, if I create something, it comes to be from me, but it also comes to be in the whole, in the outer atmosphere too. It mushrooms up out of both simultaneously. And so we're in a very ripe period, and a very interesting period in the tradition of astrology and the study of astrology. There's so many directions we can go with. We can begin to examine reality in very different perspectives than kind of the Western materialist perspective, in such a way that is, I think, will start to reveal some beautiful twists and turns and gems for the collective and for all of us personally. And then also one caveat that I will throw in there as well, as a sense, because we're in a Uranus Saturn time. We're in a Uranus Saturn square transit right now. So the Uranus is the patron archetype of astrology. So there's a sense that, you know, we are here making astrology real. Saturn likes to make things real. We're here and making it into, we're creating something. We're creating a framework for something. It's not just talk. It's actually creating a structure, and it's putting the kind of the feet on the ground and making something happen. So that's very Uranus Saturn. Uranus is a celebratory, the excitement that we're all feeling. Bringing in Saturn, though, I also want to bring in Saturn, honor Saturn, in a kind of a word of you know, Saturn has a cautionary way as well, or kind of a pragmatic way. That when we look at charts and we look at an individual's chart, or even the chart of an endeavor, let's say we look at an individual's chart, and there's aspects in there, and we see an aspect, we see maybe Pluto square something, or some Neptune square something, Saturn square something, whatever it is. We want to always be aware that there's some, with the aspects, there is this beautiful paradoxical balance between form and the infinite, or form and open possibility, form and freedom. And so this really speaks to the Saturn Uranus transit we're going through right now, in the sense that an aspect is going to show up in a person's life as an actual concrete manifestation of something, of some tension, right? But it doesn't have to show up as any one thing. Within those archetypal umbrellas, an infinite number of possibilities that all match the symbolism. And I feel that's important to remember, because one thing we're going to be tasked with as astrologers is not pathologizing any aspects moving forward, in the sense of like, wow, you got Uranus square, whatever, you know, that means this, that's, you know, that's anything in a kind of like a negative context, or a context of like, you know, you're screwed or something like that. Because there's that balance between form and freedom, that yes, you have Uranus square something, you have Neptune square something, you are going to experience that theme in your life. But within that umbrella archetypal theme, it could be anything, and it could evolve into anything and still be true to that theme, if that makes sense, in the sense that it could be challenging and it can evolve. It can become, it is us, so we can mature and grow. And as we mature and grow, that aspect is maturing and growing. And so that's, that's something that I feel as astrologers is something we're gonna be tasked with, is to realize that in every human is the beauty of all creation, in every person, and no aspect is going to overshadow that. In fact, the aspects themselves they might be tense, they might be difficult, but they are us being tasked with seeing the beauty therein and allowing the beauty of that to come out. So quite a fertile time, and it's just so exciting. It's just a really, really exciting time in our collective evolution. So thank you so much for my slot here, and I'm going to pass it again back to Becca.
Thank you, James. That was so beautiful. And I just agree so much with all of the themes you were bringing forward there. It's been wonderful to hear from the panelists and the other contributors about all the ways you've been drawn toward astrology, or astrology has drawn you towards it. And I can very much connect with that feeling of, in some ways, astrology choosing you or asking you to take up that path. And as a second generation astrologer, this was definitely not what I thought I would be doing with my life. And yet there is absolutely nothing I would rather be engaged with more than the practice, the art, the discipline of astrology. And really, I feel like I could write a love poem to the astrological tradition. And one of the things that I find so profound working as a counseling astrologer is the opportunity to invite someone into the experience of falling in love with their own chart. And that, especially if you have the opportunity to give someone their first reading, which is such a privilege, to be able to say, here, this is a map of the cosmos at the moment that you took your first breath, that you breathed into yourself everything that was happening in the world, in the cosmos at that moment, and that you are now given the opportunity to live out the potential of that moment for the rest of your life. And so I see astrology as something that can be deeply empowering, because it gives us a lens on, what do we need to work on? What are we hiding from ourselves that we are struggling to uncover? And of course, bringing psychology in with astrology is such an exquisite marriage between these two disciplines, because psychology gives us the tools to be able to take the astrological knowledge and integrate it and transform our souls towards their evolution. And something that I will at times say is that astrology can both be descriptive and prescriptive. And this picks up on some of the threads that James was bringing forward too, about archetypal multivalence, the spectrum of ways that an archetypal complex can come forward, whether that's in our own individual chart or in our personal transits or in the world transits. This range of ways, the spectrum from life-enhancing potentials to more challenging or shadowy potentials. And on the one hand, astrology can offer that descriptive picture. This is what could happen. This is what one might expect. And when we use it as a reflective, retrospective tool, It also can describe, well, this is what happened. Here's the particular archetypal crystallization that took place at that moment in your life or at this period in history. But it also can be prescriptive in the sense that we're being invited to participate, to step into what these archetypal complexes could be. And so when we look forward at, say, an upcoming personal transit or a current or future world transit, sometimes we can have that feeling of fear come in, especially if it's something that has historically unfolded in a difficult way. Saturn-Pluto alignments correlating with the start of both world wars, or with 9/11, or now as we've been going through this global pandemic. But we can also ask ourselves, how can I live most fruitfully and consciously with these archetypal energies, and see, for example, Saturn Pluto as an opportunity to discipline our empowered selves. And so we can live more fully into the foundations that we want to structure. What solid ground do we want to stand on? What do we want to build that will endure into the future, that is worth lasting? And of course, we can do this with any one of the 45 combinations of the planets out, the luminaries out through Pluto. Every single one we could sit down with and ask, what are the ways that this can come forward that would be of greatest benefit and service to myself, to my relations, to my community, and to the world at large. And so that is one of the extraordinary gifts that astrology offers us, is that call, that invitation to participate, to step more fully into the dance with these archetypal powers. And really, astrology is it's an empowering guide of how to live not just more consciously, not just more mindfully, but also more soulfully. It invites soul back into our experience. And I love the word astrology itself, astrologos, the language of the stars. When we contemplate what astrology is, it really is a language that has many dialects, many techniques that are holographic, that we can choose one approach or another, but mysteriously, miraculously, we arrive at this same place of this understanding of the soul and this understanding of the cosmos. And so astrology really is a language that has been offered to us by the cosmos so that we can better come into relationship with that wholeness of which we are not separate, but rather are an intimate, integral part. So thank you to everyone here for your presence and your support to this beautiful endeavor that is being birthed of the Archetypal News Network. I will now pass over to Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, I love everything you both just said. I really agree with you, Becca, about the power of a first reading and what that can do, and what a privilege it is to, to be able to do that, because it was my first reading by a fabulous archetypal astrologer named Richard Stromer, and personal mythologist, who became my mentor after that, who then, introduced me to Cosmos and Psyche and everything that, that reading just kind of, I was walking around for days just going, what happened, and yeah, so some of the things that James was saying are things that I really resonate with, especially when it comes to evolution and language, because of course, like we've already said, astrology is a language. And I've thought about this a lot, about words like spiritual or evolution or God. And there's this way that when we go to try to describe something, we're always getting sort of tricked by the universe in a way that you can say something and mean it a certain way, but it's going to be heard through whatever filters some other people are filtering it through. So, you know, a word like God, like, give me a break. Like it's almost a useless word at this point because people have so many different ideas about it. But same thing with evolution. We conceive of it in a linear sort of a way. And I think that the great gift that astrology gives us is that it is a language that automatically, or at least archetypal astrology, right? It is a language that automatically contains all of that meaning within itself. Like Ren said, if you know how to speak it, you can shorthand say, you know, I've got Saturn Pluto, you know, I've got a Saturn Pluto conjunction, you know, on my ascendant, you know, and people know, like, oh, okay. But like Becca said, you know, maybe that's classically like the hardest type of aspect you can have, but it's also, there's so much potential beauty in it because, you know, if we think about the time that we're living through, which has been so colored by Saturn Pluto, you know, the Saturn Pluto Jupiter conjunction that James mentioned seeing, you know, 10 years ago, what's going to happen in 2020? It's like we knew that something hard was coming up, right? It wasn't going to be easy, but yet we stand now like on this precipice of like of something really, really new and wonderful. And so, you know, we know when we engage with these more challenging archetypes in astrology that the potential for real lasting transformation and new life really truly is always there. And I think that another aspect that's important is that, you know, if we are going to really work with these energies and apply what we learn from astrology and embody it more, it can't just stop at astrology, you know, because astrology is going to give us back whatever we bring to it, you know. And so if we're coming at it with a fearful or materialistic sort of mind, it can give us back some scary answers that don't necessarily always come true. But nevertheless, it can do more harm than good if we're not kind of cleansing our own filters. And so I feel like psychological work, spiritual practice, whatever manner, you know, whatever method suits you is really essential to doing the kind of work that astrology points to and says, like, hey, you know, you can, there really are these wonderful opportunities for living out your chart, but it is kind of on us to learn how to work with those energies on their own terms. And that is not working with energies on their own terms is not the kind of classic rational linear sort of way. And so I just think that the chart for today is so beautiful because yes, it's a beautiful chart for this moment, but it also, it's almost like the moment chose itself to kind of highlight, you know, these are the real potentials that archetypal astrology can offer. And so, you know, bringing together the sun and the moon, the solar, you know, we're talking about the marriage of soul and spirit, right? Or we could say Shiva and Shakti, or consciousness and embodiment, or thought and emotion, or whatever. We're bringing these together in a new way. And we've been very focused on rational thought, clear perception. I know what's what, I know what I want, I know where I'm going, you know, to the detriment of more kind of obscure ways of knowing, of intuition, of feeling, and of the kind of embodied depth and mysteries of nature. then you add into that that beautiful open sense of transcendent inspiration, and that kind of mind of God quality that Neptune brings in, and the beautiful way that Venus in there, both opens us up to these new aesthetic dimensions where we can just stand in awe of the universe like we should, and but it also brings us into a new relationship with the universe where we are now relating to the cosmos as another being, right? And that we are beings in conversation and dialogue with the cosmos. And so just the stellium for today, just it kind of bowled me over when I saw that. And I also looked up, I just did a search for anybody who had that same quadruple conjunction. And one of the few people that I found was the conductor Otto Klemperer, who is a famous, conductor in the early 20th century. He also had a Mars-Mercury conjunction that made his way of speaking kind of pointed and direct and maybe aggressive at times. But he has this quote that I love, where it was something like, musicologists know everything about ology, but nothing about music. And I think that in his kind of like jabby sort of a way, this is what we're doing. Is although we are practitioners of astrology, right? It's more than an ology. It is both an ology, a study, a kind of intellectual discipline, and this way of appreciating the music of everything. And to me, as far as what this offers the world, it's just implicit that this is kind of what the world needs, to my mind. But to just explain that a little more, if we think about where we're at now, having gone through the challenging transits of Uranus, Pluto for the last 12 years, and then really just coming to a head over the last year with the triple conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, and now moving into Saturn, Uranus. It's like we've gone through this extreme kind of breakdown, and just like all of the sort of rotting flesh of our culture has just sort of bubbled to the surface, and a lot of wonderful changes happened. A lot of really destructive things have happened. And we're now entering this phase where it feels like what's wanting to be born is starting to rumble a little bit more. It's starting to get more active. And the new really wants to come through. And that's that, Uranus acting on Saturn. It's like it wants to shake off the old crust and let the new come through. And I've been thinking of this as a time of fertile chaos, and the chaos of Uranus, because Uranus can have this kind of really, like the snow globe is really agitated with Uranus sometimes. And yes, Saturn is there to help us make the change real. But in this time of chaos, it's like possibilities arise, and you could go in either direction. And I feel like coming back to this idea of language, the fact that so many opinions and beliefs and conspiracy theories and just false equivalencies of different ways of looking at data, and this very kind of maddening, insane sort of a thing that's taken over in the collective psyche and given rise to some pretty scary, to my mind, nonsense that had, these kind of psychic epidemics. The flip side of that is that, like, if we can kind of hold if we can kind of sink our keel deep in the water and not be jostled around and tipped over, we really can move into a greater awakening. And so, coming back to that idea that language is always playing tricks on us. It's like, QAnon's been calling their thing the Great Awakening. And it's like, the Great Awakening? It's the opposite day? It's like, there is a Great Awakening that's possible, right? Also, at the same time that the divine feminine is really coming back in the world, what is, has been one of public enemy number one, ISIS? What's up with that? It's like the universe plays these weird tricks on us with language, and I feel like it's inviting us to find a new language. And so I have no idea where it's all going to lead, but I do feel like if we can open up to new ways of synthesizing information, new ways of engaging with each other as entire universes, like James said, new ways of engaging with the universe itself, it can only be good. So thank you.
All right, I guess I'm up next. Thanks, Alex, that was great. So I just have some final quick reflections here. It sort of picks up on the theme of soul or spirituality, because I kind of wanted to just talk a little bit about astrology as a spiritual practice, just by engaging with it. And really from the sense that, we can come at that from so many directions, but for me, I think about it in terms of how it can really humble you. So we know that like a transit is coming up, or we know to expect this or that. Cognitively, we're usually not perfectly correct, though we have a sense of the tone. But B, it can really bring you to your knees in a way that some of these transits that you would have never anticipated. And sometimes, like, well, we'll just say for right now, I'm sure you've all have seen recently these reflections on the past year of being in the lockdown, and jokes about how we've all gained so much weight. We haven't seen people, we haven't gone anywhere. It's pretty amazing that we've been able to adapt at some level despite those challenges. And so that's sort of like the essence, I think, of what astrology can do, because as you start to study these archetypes, you can feel it like a sucker punch when you're going through it. Are humbled. But then the flip side of all those archetypes is like the tenacity, the resilience, everything that you would need to sort of move forward. And so just knowing that is helpful, obviously, from the astrological perspective. And just a few other little things is, I know Becca mentioned the first time you have your chart read or you read for somebody else, it sort of like helps people to understand the aspects of themselves that they maybe always attached to, but didn't realize was part of a larger archetypal pattern. So it allows for a little bit of a detachment so that there's not so much suffering, and you feel like you're bound by your personality or bound by this thought pattern or bound by these things, which, when it comes up against all this stuff that we're talking about, gets really challenged and shaken. But that lens can be like, oh, that's just this part of me. I can observe it from another perspective, which to me is the essence of, or part of at least a spiritual practice that I find so meaningful. I'm sure for many as well. And of course, I know this came up already before, but suffering being time bound. So while we're being forced to suffer and reflect, astrology delivers us the news that you just need to hold on for this much longer. But sometimes right at the end, you're like, oh, I don't know. Even if we just look at the pandemic, and as Saturn and Pluto has been sort of slowly separating, we knew that coming into February and March, it'd start to open up a little with some of these other aspects, but now we actually feel it. And it's just such a great thing to observe. So there's that teaching, but that leading you out and giving you that map along the way. And so just sort of related to all this, I think the other thing that it can teach us as we explore this together is a sense of community resilience and seeing how these patterns reflect and work in others. So there's like a compassion. So, we know there's a difficult aspect, or we know like today at the start of the session, Neptune and the sun, all these like things are happening, a very Neptunian day. We understand what's going on, how we're all being affected in different ways. And so that can build community compassion, interpersonal compassion, and also just a sense of how we can work through it all together. So I guess that was sort of my ode to astrology as a spiritual practice. And I look forward to exploring these themes as Anne launches and continues. So thanks again for having me. And it was wonderful to celebrate this with you all today.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, everyone. Thanks for bearing with our little bit technical rough start today. Now it feels like we're just flowing along, but we're almost at the end of our program. I really appreciate things that have been said here. Lisa, when you mentioned the comment about how, you know, we're all gaining weight and sitting around at home, it reminds me of a quote by Robert M. Hutchins, born with Moon trine Venus, similar to the conjunction in the sky right now. He said, "When I feel like exercising, I just lie down until the feeling goes away." I love that one. And there's another funny kind of Neptunian joke, which our friend and colleague Art Granoff sent to me last week. One monk is saying to the other one, "I've never met anyone so thoughtless in my life. Keep up the good work." Thank you, Master. That's a Buddhist compliment. That's right up there with the make me one with everything. So let's see, I've got a few more comments to make, and it's just wonderful to feel the synergy with all of you, and I agree with everything that you said. I was able to have a series of fascinating and inspiring conversations with Rick at Esalen, and he was very kind and generous and enthusiastic with his time. And, you know, my first year at Esalen was just like a cornucopia of insights and possibilities. And, you know, basically I consider it my alma mater, one of my alma maters. It sort of put me on a path toward healing that, you know, I've been walking on, you know, ever since then. Rick was one of the important friends and mentors that I connected with there. I also, again, thank you to Brian Like, our old family friend who's watching tonight, and Joyce. So Rick's approach to astrology evolved out of the work of people like, well, Dane Rudyard and Charles Harvey, and some other English astrologers. We tend to focus in archetypal astrology on the core bodies of the solar system, but it's not like a, you know, like there are other, we can look at, you know, other bodies in the solar system as well, but we tend to focus on the sun, moon, and planets. However, as Becca said so skillfully and perceptively in a podcast that we did together several years ago, it's not so much a belief system, archetypal astrology, as a way of approaching astrology. And the key element in it is multivalence. Several of you have talked about that. James talked about that, Becca. For any given planetary alignment, there are a range of possible expressions. And it is the quality of consciousness that we bring to bear upon it, our relationship with our psyche, you know, cultural context, perhaps unmeasurable, such as karma and grace, as Rick writes. And we could also say, you know, perhaps the universal mind's desire for variety of experience. And so in this approach to astrology, you know, people are not tied to their aspects. Every birth chart represents spirit incarnating into matter. We can see the way that the divine, universal, infinite consciousness came into particular time and in space as us. We are a piece of the divine having a human experience. But every chart also represents a blueprint for emancipating the spirit within us, the eternal and divine universal consciousness within us, back out of the particular temporal spatial coordinates of our lifetime and into that plenitude of the divine consciousness. And so, you know, our first rule is do no harm, you know, and then after that are a number of equally important rules, like to inspire, to nurture, to comfort, to give a time limit on things. I want to thank Rick in particular for his discovery of wider orbs, slightly wider orbs on aspects. This has enabled us to, in Rick's research, essentially to calibrate the archetypal telescope just a little bit wider orbs, and suddenly click, things become intelligible. We can understand cycles in history in a way that no one else has been able to do. And this was an amazing discovery that Rick made through, trial and error, through research, the process of scientific discovery. I began writing and researching systematically in early May 1993, and I've been writing ever since then. I'm basically the same pace every week. I had 3 uncompleted projects, and then 3 unpublished manuscripts, and then finally 3 published books. So, I've been working at this for a long, long time, and I want to send my encouragement to astrology researchers out there. This is a beautiful field to be in. I've often felt like I was walking in an orchard, and it was so laden with every kind of bountiful meaning and sustenance of research and discovery and understanding. And, I was just going around picking up the fruit that was right in front of me, but there was an infinite number of sort of fruiting, creating trees, and there's no shortage of areas of research. And we really hope to foster people's learning about astrology and encourage their own research, and give them a chance to showcase their knowledge when they get to a certain level. Again, I'm just so proud of my colleagues. Just several things. Carmen, if you could hear me, could you please close that door? I'm hearing myself from the other room. Thank you so much. Astrology can validate our experiences, and as several of you said already, reveal that they have a time limit. This helps us to face the difficult times when we know it's just, 6 more months. By the way, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is about another 10 months. It is definitely still happening. So we are still in that kind of vice grip, hard labor, hard birth contraction, bearing down on the collective psyche. It's inflected more now by the Saturn square Uranus, additionally, which kind of adds extremism, sudden alternations between states of constriction and states of liberation, back and forth, and kind of hard juxtapositions of like the old and then the new. For example, Meghan Markle's and her husband's interview with Oprah, she's essentially representing a Uranian force, a Promethean force, kind of a rebellion in a sense, and exposing, but a very powerful one, meeting of in some senses a Saturnian force of the tradition of the royal family. But it's painful for everyone, and we are all in this together, and this is a very can be very painful, these Saturn Uranus evolutionary breaks and breakthroughs, but they do tend to have a forward moving evolutionary quality. We're all trying to learn and grow with the situation that we find ourselves in our lives. Astrology can comfort and encourage us in the hard times. It's probably its greatest benefit. It can also keep us humble and careful in the expansive times, and it can slow us down in the fast times. So it is always there to kind of help us keep our center, keep our perspective. All things must pass, and that can be very beneficial for people. It can reveal our Mars triggers. We can begin to see that every time Mars makes a hard transit to my moon, hard meaning dynamic transit, conjunction, square, or opposition, that's when I tend to be the most reactive, fly off the handle, or something that people might discover. Something like that might be a different trigger in your own chart, but Mars really does have that kind of catalyzing, incendiary, forceful, and sometimes aggressive quality. It's very helpful to know that. Astrology can reveal good days for doing sessions. And this is actually how Rick first got into archetypal astrology, was to help to comprehend the experiences that emerge in sessions of deep self-exploration with breathwork and with psychedelics. And his work with Stan Groff, our beloved friend and mentor for many of us, has been such an important part in the genesis of archetypal astrology, the connection with the perinatal matrices and the coex systems, these systems of memories that each of us has within us, both positive ones and difficult ones. And how we feel at any given time is largely determined by which one of these memory systems we are being influenced by, whether it's the positive ones or the negative ones. And the movement of the flashlight onto various systems within us, coex systems, memory systems of condensed experience, is correlated with our aspects and our transits to our aspects. And this is very helpful in psychology for understanding why people are depressed at some times and happy at other times, inspired, demoralized, and so on. As I said, every chart represents incarnation of spirit into matter, and also a roadmap to emancipate spirit back out of matter, back into the infinite and eternal divine consciousness. That is our highest need and our highest yearning, and it's the most important goal of astrology. But as Becca made clear, and everyone has alluded to, it's not just about transcending. There's also a higher redemption, is to redeem our incarnation, to redeem our time in this body, in this time and space. That is soul. Sun Neptune correlates with spirit in archetypal astrology, and that is the transcendent, vertically ascending vector. And that's a very important vector. That one kind of takes us at death, so it's good to practice that and to spend some time on the other side. That's what transpersonal experiences are. So we're more comfortable when death comes. And it helps us to not be afraid of the changes in life. But Moon Neptune represents soul, and that is the divine coming down inward and within us into every corner and crevice and cozy nook of our personal lives. That is soul. That is the divine in matter, in the feminine, in the material realm. And that is also a very important part of spirituality and astrology. And Becca basically referred to these same vectors that I just described as prescriptive in some sense, and also descriptive. There's a certain element of this is the way things are, prescriptive, range of possibilities, but also these are the directions toward emancipation. About Saturn, Pluto, we're in that. And Stan's phrase, deep and systematic self-exploration, is such a concise shorthand to understand the Saturn-Pluto possibilities and potentials. And Stan, of course, born with Saturn square Pluto during the 1931, during the Depression T-square, and this sort of deep Pluto and systematic Saturn self-exploration is his redeemed understanding of the possibility of Saturn and Pluto. The Saturn square Uranus that we're in for several years, 3 years, manifests as responsible freedom, incremental emancipation. In sessions, we may at times choose to do smaller amounts of the medicine if we're using medicine. It's not how much we work through, it's how good we feel at the end that determines how healing medicine journey is, as Stan says. And so bite-sized pieces, getting a good resolution on every session, taking time to set up the Cape Canaveral of our session space with the support we need, and then we can blast off without restrictions. We handle Saturn, then Uranus can fully unfurl without any need to hold back. This is how Saturn Uranus also redeems itself. And Stan also has Saturn square Uranus in his natal chart. And he talks so much about set and setting and, strict guidelines and protocols around the deepest sessions. A couple other points, and again, thank you for this beautiful opportunity. For the world, astrology can help to bring more balance to our culture by seeing on a daily basis, all of us, the interior, subjective, psychological sides of things. Several of the panelists talked about that, not just focusing on the externals, but how does it feel? How does it connect? What is the meaning within things? I envision news programs like CNN with transit info in the the bottom of the screen or the upper right-hand corner. Hopefully it will never be as busy as CNN, but this is information that would benefit people to know about, and this is equally important as our latest enemy, or the stock market prices and so on. Astrology can validate our collective experiences. At any given time, we are sharing half of our transits with all of humanity. Rick is able to really show this, that right now, half of your transit influences you are sharing with all of humanity. And this importance of world transits is really a hallmark of this approach. The reason that Rick was able to study and understand world transits is because we're not tied to birth time in this approach, which affects the houses. So when we're studying the 60s, the phenomenon of the 60s, people might say, when did it start and where did it happen? They need that information to cast the chart. But Rick said, look at the entire time period, 1960 to 72. That fits exactly with the conjunction of Uranus and Pluto with a 15-degree orb. And so that is another breakthrough. Astrology helps us to understand the complex mixtures and nuances of influences within any event. There are always many different things happening and different directions and elements within it. On a more mundane level, I think astrology could be used, and I think probably is being used for things like dating apps, but it could never tell you should be with this person or you shouldn't be with that person. But it's a fun thing. Barbara mentioned that, or Danielle rather, that I think for many people, especially who are single, looking at the charts of their partners is a very fun side of astrology. Just a little more comment about the spirit and soul, the sort of ascending vector and the descending vector, both equally important. The divine is in both of them and within us. We need to be open to both modes, both spiritual transcendence as well as fully embodied incarnation. And this embodied incarnation and the healing of our bodies and our emotions was such an important part of the Spirit of Esalen Institute and what made it so special. I'm going to share my screen finally and just look at our website. Thank you for listening, everyone. Right here. Can you all see that? Alex, can you see that? Okay, so here's our website, and the address is archetypalnews.net. And thank you to Alex Stein for coming up with that. I was looking at a couple different possibilities. That was an excellent insight. All the panel and other people have been so helpful in making decisions along this way. Becca has been very helpful, James and other people with important decisions that we had to make. So here's our programs page of our website, and you'll see here, tomorrow I'll be doing the first Planet Talk. I'm going to speak very briefly about the power outages in Texas as an expression of the Saturn square Uranus, the sort of individualism of Texas and maybe the shadow side of it, and also the very painful racial issues that have been continuing to be brought to the fore as an expression of the Saturn-Uranus. And then Mondays, James will be doing his astrological weather forecast. Tuesdays, art, world transits. Today, he does that podcast every day, or webinar, 7 days a week on his own website, and he's now on Apple Podcasts. You can check that out. Chris McNulty will be doing Planet Talk on Wednesdays. Maestro Alex Stein on Thursdays. Fridays, we're hoping Chad Harris will be doing Archetypes in the News. He's been a longtime colleague and very experienced astrologer in this approach, and he has other recordings on his own website you can check out. And then Bill Street is coming out of retirement every second week to do a Planet Talk. Just brilliant. Some of you may remember his online presentations every month about 15 years ago, 15 to 10 years ago. Incredibly brilliant. And then possibly the first Saturday of each month, I think Becca Tarnis and Laura Machete are going to, I think, talk about a movie that they love or some other piece of art. And then Saffron Rossi honoring the solstices and equinoxes of 2021. I imagine she'll be doing one this week. And then these lunations, stay tuned on this website for these exact times and people, and there'll be more information we'll be putting out on the Archetypal Astrology and Transpersonal Psychology group on Facebook. Is the most reliable place to get our announcements. So I hope you can join in live for those. Of course, there's a faculty page here that you can read people's bios and so on. I had a lot of fun putting this together. I got a couple majorly negative responses to the colors of the website, but I have to amuse myself, so I'm going to keep it for a little while anyway. So thank you. I'll let all the presenters say just 5 seconds of goodbye at the end, and then we can all say goodbye to the audience. So thank you so much for being part of this experience with us. Any final words, James?
I say onward. This is going to be, I think we're entering into a new decade here, and I think it's more than a new decade. I think it's a new era. I'm just going to call it that. And I think this is a part of it. So get ready to have some fun, everyone.
Yeah. Have a great day, everyone. I'll turn on all your mics here. We can all say goodbye. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourselves so you can all say goodbye as you go.
This was awesome.
Bye. Thanks, Barbara.
Bye,
and thank you very much. It was good to be around.
Thank you.
Share your
Yes,
energy.
thanks so much.
Yes.
I loved it.
I appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lots of love. Thanks, Ren.
Auf Wiedersehen. Good
Best of luck.
night.